Somewhere around 9,000 years ago, a person picked up a piece of fruit, forgot about it, and then came back to find it had done something strange. It smelled different. It fizzed. And when they tasted it anyway, because of course they did, the world felt a little softer. That was it. That was the moment. The tiny accident that eventually, after thousands of years of wrong turns, lucky guesses, and one very important French chemist, put a machine in the sky. Here is the full story of how rotten fruit became an airplane. Step 1. The fruit rots. You don't do anything. You don't plan anything. You leave some grapes or grain in a clay pot, and nature does what nature always does. Wild yeast floating in the air lands on the sugar, eats it, and breathes out alcohol. The pot starts to bubble. Something alive is happening inside, and nobody knows what it is yet. But they know what it does. They drink it, and suddenly they feel warmer, looser, braver, less afraid of the dark, so they start doing it on purpose. They mash fruit, they store grain, they let things sit. They're not scientists. They don't know about yeast. They don't know about sugar. They don't even have a word for chemistry. But they've stumbled onto one of the most powerful biological reactions on the planet. And they're going to spend the next several thousand years squeezing everything they can out of it. By 7000 BC, people in China are mixing rice, honey, and fruit in clay jars to make the world's oldest known intentional fermented drink. The Sumerians in Mesopotamia are brewing beer and liking it so much they invent a goddess specifically for it. The Egyptians bake bread with the same bubbling yeast they use to brew beer. Fermentation isn't just a drink anymore, it's part of how civilization eats. But here's the thing nobody asks. What exactly is doing the fermenting? For thousands of years, nobody knows. It's magic. It's God. It's the air. It just happens. And that mystery will sit there completely unsolved for the next 8,000 years. Step 2. Someone tries to make it stronger. This is where alchemists show up, and if you've heard of them, you probably think they spent all their time trying to turn lead into gold. Which is true, but along the way, they stumbled onto something far more useful. Somewhere around 800 AD, Arab alchemists are working with a device called an alembic, a clay and copper pot designed to boil liquids and catch the steam. They're not trying to make whiskey, they're trying to find the hidden essence of things, the pure soul of a substance. They call it alcohol, which is where the word alcohol comes from. Here's what they discover. When you heat fermented liquid, the alcohol turns to vapor first. Capture that vapor, cool it down, and you get a liquid far stronger than anything fermentation alone can produce. Wine is roughly 12% alcohol. What comes out of the alembic is closer to 80%. They call it aqua vitae, water of life. They think it might be a medicine, maybe even the secret to immortality. It isn't. But it does travel across Europe, inside monasteries and royal courts, and the notes of secretive scholars, getting refined and improved. By the 1200s, it's being called a miracle cure for every illness known. By the 1700s, it's in every port city in the world, funding trade empires and causing enormous amounts of trouble. But nobody still knows why it works. Nobody understands the thing that actually makes the alcohol in the first place. That changes in 1857. Step 3. A French chemist looks through a microscope and breaks everything open. His name is Louis Pasteur, and he is trying to solve a problem for a wine manufacturer in northern France whose fermentation keeps going wrong. The wine turns sour, the alcohol won't form properly, and nobody can explain it. Pasteur looks at the fermenting liquid under a microscope. What he sees changes science forever. There are living things in there, tiny, single-celled organisms, yeast, and they are eating the sugar and producing the alcohol. Fermentation isn't chemistry, it isn't magic, it's biology, it's life. Billions of microscopic creatures doing their job, invisible to the naked eye, right there in every loaf of bread and every barrel of wine in human history. And here's what makes it enormous. If tiny living things can cause fermentation, maybe tiny living things cause other things too. Disease, infection, illness. The invisible world is full of organisms doing things to us that we've never seen. Pasteur spends the rest of his life proving it. He develops vaccines. He invents pasteurization. He lays the entire foundation for modern medicine. All because the wine went sour. Step 4. The same process that makes beer starts to make power. Here's where it gets strange. In the 1800s, engineers are obsessed with a problem. Steam engines work, but they're heavy and slow. You need a furnace, a boiler, a water supply. You can't put one in a carriage and drive it down a street. What they need is an engine that burns liquid fuel. Fuel that could be poured and lit and made to explode in a controlled way, pushing a piston, turning a shaft. The fuel they reach for, initially, is ethanol, pure grain alcohol. The same molecule that's been produced by yeast eating sugar for 9,000 years. It burns cleanly, produces real power, and at the time, it's actually easier to get than refined petroleum. Nikolaus Otto builds the first practical internal combustion engine in 1876. It runs on liquid fuel. The idea spreads fast. Gottlieb Daimler mounts a small engine on a bicycle in 1885. Carl Benz puts one in a carriage in 1886. The automobile has arrived, and under its hood is a machine running on the direct descendant of the same chemical process that filled those ancient clay pots with bubbles. Now, the question is obvious. If an engine can move a carriage, can it move something through the air? Step 5. Two brothers in Ohio ask the right question. Wilbur and Orville Wright run a bicycle shop. They are not engineers by training. They are not wealthy. They have no university backing and no government funding. What they have is a very specific obsession: lift, drag, and control. They spend years building gliders, testing wings, measuring airflow. They write to manufacturers asking for a lightweight engine. Every single one writes back and says no such engine exists, so they build one themselves in 6 weeks. A 4-cylinder gasoline engine, 12 horsepower, 179 pounds, light enough to fly. On December 17, 1903, on a beach in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, that engine turns 2 propellers. The aircraft lifts. It travels 120 feet in 12 seconds. It is the first powered flight in human history. And the fuel in the tank? Gasoline. A refined petroleum product, yes, but running on the exact same principle as every engine before it. Controlled combustion of a liquid fuel, producing expanding gas, pushing a piston, turning a shaft. A direct mechanical descendant of the engines that ran on ethanol, which was a direct chemical descendant of the yeast that turned sugar into alcohol, which was a direct accidental descendant of the fruit that rotted in a clay pot 9,000 years ago. The chain is unbroken. Rotten fruit teaches humans about fermentation. Fermentation produces alcohol. Alchemists concentrate alcohol into something powerful. Pasteur explains what fermentation actually is, and that discovery unlocks biology, medicine, and chemistry all at once. The same controlled combustion principle powers the first cars. Cars demand lightweight engines. Lightweight engines make the first airplane possible. Most people think of alcohol as a drink, but really it was a door. The first time a human being observed matter transforming itself into something new, bubbling, changing, alive, and decided to figure out why. Every time you board an airplane, somewhere in that chain of events is a forgotten piece of fruit in a clay pot, doing something nobody understood, that nobody could stop thinking about. The world runs on curiosity, and apparently, so does the plane.